She thought she was just grabbing a random stranger in a dimly lit hallway to hide from her violently toxic ex, a desperate, impulsive kiss meant to help her blend into the shadows. But when she pulled away, the man wasn't a guest. She had just kissed the city's most dangerous mafia boss. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel in Chicago was suffocatingly loud, an ocean of clinking champagne flutes and forced corporate laughter. Chloe Thompson stood near the edge of the room, her fingers gripped tight around a crystal glass. She was 28, a brilliant senior accountant at a top-tier logistics firm. But tonight, she felt like a terrified teenager. Chloe smoothed her hands down the front of her emerald green velvet dress. It was a beautiful gown, custom-tailored to fit her plus-size figure. For the first time in years, she had looked in the mirror and felt genuinely glamorous, proud of her soft, full curves and the way the fabric hugged her waist and hips. But that fragile confidence shattered the second she saw him across the room. Derek Gallagher. Her ex-fiancé. A man who had spent 3 years systematically dismantling her self-esteem. Derek was a mid-level investment banker with a silver tongue and a cruelty he saved exclusively for her. He had monitored her meals, mocked her weight under the guise of caring about her health, and constantly reminded her that a woman her size was lucky to have a man like him. Leaving him had been the hardest, most dangerous thing she had ever done, especially after the glass-shattering rage he'd unleashed on their final night together. And now he was here. He was supposed to be in New York, but there he stood, by the ice sculpture, his cold blue eyes scanning the crowd. Then they locked onto her. A sickening smirk twisted his lips. He pushed off the bar and started walking straight toward her. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Chloe's chest. Her breath caught. She couldn't do this. She couldn't let him corner her in public, couldn't endure his whispered threats, or the way he'd grab her arm, fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave bruises, all while smiling for the cameras. Chloe turned on her heel and practically fled. She shoved past a group of laughing executives, ignoring their indignant protests, her heels sinking into the thick carpet as she rushed for the exit. She slipped through a set of heavy mahogany doors, leaving the blaring jazz band behind her, and found herself in a dim, secluded corridor leading toward the private VIP suites. Footsteps echoed behind her, heavy, deliberate, closing fast. Chloe. Derek's voice rang down the hall, dripping with familiar, mocking condescension. Don't be pathetic. Stop walking. She looked around frantically. The corridor was empty, no side doors, no restrooms, nowhere to hide except a deep, shadowed alcove halfway down the hall, where a tall figure stood with his back to her, seemingly studying a painting on the wall. Derek was rounding the corner. She had seconds. Driven by sheer blind terror, Chloe lunged into the alcove. She grabbed the stranger by the lapels of his flawlessly tailored suit, spun him around, and pressed her lips desperately against his. She expected a shout of outrage. She expected him to shove her away in disgust. Instead, a pair of large, powerful hands closed around her waist. They didn't push her back, they pulled her flush against a rock-hard chest. The kiss, meant to be nothing but a shield, ignited instantly into something terrifyingly real. The stranger's mouth was warm, tasting of expensive whiskey and mint. Before Chloe could process what was happening, he took total control of the kiss, his tongue brushing her bottom lip, demanding entry, and a jolt of pure heat shot straight through her. He held her with a possessive, unyielding grip, his large hands spreading wide across the velvet at her back, holding her curves like they were exactly what he'd been waiting for. Footsteps rushed past the alcove. Chloe. Derek muttered a curse, completely oblivious to the two people entwined in the shadows, and kept walking down the hall. Chloe pulled back, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her cheeks burned. Her lipstick was smeared. I am so sorry, she stammered, eyes fixed on his chest, on the expensive silk tie and the solid gold tie clip. There was a man, my ex. He was following me, and I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. When the stranger didn't answer, she slowly lifted her gaze. The man looking down at her had a face that looked carved from marble by an artist who specialized in lethal beauty, sharp, aristocratic cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with dark stubble, and eyes so dark they were nearly black. He was undeniably gorgeous, but there was a quiet, terrifying violence humming off him. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. Predatory. Is that so? His voice was a deep, raspy baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. Before Chloe could apologize again, a sound made her freeze, the synchronized click of a dozen gun safeties switching off. Chloe turned her head, the blood draining from her face. Stepping out of the shadows of the adjoining VIP suite were 6 massive men in black suits, expressions stone-faced, every one of them holding a silenced pistol pointed at her head. "Boss," one of the men, heavily scarred, Italian, spoke up, his voice flat. "Want me to dispose of her?" Chloe stopped breathing. She looked back at the man she had just kissed. Vincent Moretti. She recognized the name from a hushed, terrified conversation she'd overheard between 2 senior partners at her firm. Vincent Moretti was heir to the Moretti Crime Syndicate, the most ruthless, untouchable mafia organization in the Midwest. He owned politicians, judges, half the city's real estate. People who crossed him didn't just disappear. They were erased. And she had just grabbed him by the lapels and used him as a human shield. Vincent raised a single-gloved hand. Instantly the guns lowered, vanishing back into shoulder holsters with practiced precision. He looked back down at Chloe, his dark eyes dropping slowly to take in her full figure, lingering on the plunge of her velvet neckline, the flare of her hips, before rising back to her terrified face. Unlike Derek, whose gaze always made her feel bloated and grotesque, Vincent's stare was heavy, hungry, full of raw appreciation. "Stand down, Matteo," Vincent said softly, his eyes never leaving her. The lady was just hiding. I have to go," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling so badly she could barely form the words. She pulled herself out of his grip. Vincent let her go, his hands falling gracefully to his sides. Chloe hitched up the skirt of her heavy dress and ran blindly back toward the safety of the crowded ballroom, pulse roaring in her ears. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Vincent Moretti touching his own lip, a dark, dangerous smile spreading slowly across his face as he watched her disappear. 3 days had passed since the gala. 72 hours of Chloe jumping at every shadow, locking her apartment door twice, refusing to even glance at the black SUVs that rolled past her office window. She told herself she was being paranoid. Vincent Moretti was a billionaire crime lord. He dealt in multi-million-dollar racketeering and international shipping. He wasn't going to waste his time tracking down a plus-size accountant who'd accidentally kissed him in a hallway. To a man like him, she was a bizarre, fleeting 5 seconds. Nothing more. But her relief at surviving the mafia encounter was completely overshadowed by the nightmare of Derek. He had figured out she'd been at the gala. Since that night, he'd called her phone 42 times, leaving voicemails that swung between sobbing apologies and vicious, degrading threats. He'd emailed her work account. He'd even sent a dozen wilted black roses to her desk with a note that read, "You can't hide your fat ass from me forever." Chloe was exhausted. She felt hunted, worn down to nothing by the constant anxiety. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when she finally left the office, briefcase heavy in her hand. The streets of downtown Chicago were slick, reflecting the city's neon lights. She pulled her trench coat tighter, the chill cutting through the fabric. She just wanted to get to her modest apartment in Lincoln Park, order takeout, and cry in the shower. She unlocked the front door of her building and stepped into the dim lobby. "Hello, Piggy." Chloe froze. The blood turned to ice in her veins. Derek was sitting on the lobby sofa, legs crossed, swirling a paper coffee cup in his hand. He looked disheveled, his eyes manic and bloodshot. He stood, blocking her path to the elevators. "How did you get in here?" Chloe demanded, forcing her voice steady even as her knees shook. "Derek, you need to leave." "I'll call the police." "The police?" Derek scoffed, stepping toward her. "For what?" "Trying to talk to my fiancé?" "Ex-fiancé," Chloe snapped, backing toward the glass doors. "We're done, Derek. It's been 6 months. Leave me alone." "We're done when I say we're done," Derek suddenly shouted, his calm facade shattering. He lunged forward, grabbing her roughly by the upper arm, fingers digging into her flesh exactly the way she'd feared at the gala. "Let go of me!" Chloe cried, struggling against his grip. But Derek was taller, stronger. He yanked her toward him, his face inches from hers, his breath thick with stale beer. "You think you can do better than me, Chloe?" he hissed, eyes raking over her body with disgust. "Look at you. You're huge. No one's ever going to want a fat, pathetic cow like you. I'm the only one who could ever stomach looking at you without your clothes on. You belong to me." Tears of humiliation and pain sprang to Chloe's eyes. It was the same venom, the same poison he'd injected into her for years. And God help her, a small, broken part of her still believed him. "Let her go." The voice was quiet. Not a shout, not a demand, a statement of absolute, irrefutable fact. It echoed through the empty lobby, chilling the air by 10 degrees. Derek stopped, confused, still gripping Chloe's arm. He turned toward the shadows near the mailboxes. 3 men stepped into the dim light. 2 were mountains of muscle in impeccably tailored dark suits. But it was the man standing between them that made Chloe's breath stop in her throat. Vincent Moretti. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit, an unlit cigarette resting between his fingers. He looked bored, but his dark, pitch-black eyes were fixed on Derek's hand, on the bruise forming on Chloe's arm. And in those eyes was a promise of unimaginable violence. "Who the hell are you?" Derek spat, trying to puff out his chest, though his voice wavered. "This is a private conversation. Back off." Vincent didn't even look at Derek's face. He snapped his fingers, a crisp, sharp sound. In a blur too fast to track, the scarred man from the hotel hallway, Mateo, crossed the lobby, grabbed Derek's wrist, the one holding Chloe, and twisted. A sickening crack echoed off the marble walls. Derek let out a high-pitched, agonized scream, dropping to his knees, his wrist shattered. He released Chloe instantly, clutching his ruined arm to his chest, sobbing. Chloe stumbled backward, gasping, her back hitting the cold wall. She stared in horror at Derek writhing on the floor, then up at the men who had just casually broken his bones. Vincent walked slowly across the lobby, the sharp click of his Italian leather shoes ticking like a metronome over Derek's whimpers. He stepped completely over Derek, as if the crying man were nothing more than a stain on the rug, and stopped directly in front of Chloe. Up close, he smelled exactly as she remembered: bergamot, expensive whiskey, and danger. Vincent reached out. Chloe flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, bracing for a blow. Instead, she felt the achingly gentle brush of his knuckles against the tears on her cheek. "Open your eyes, Mia Bella," Vincent murmured. Chloe slowly opened them. He was staring down at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "He called you fat," Vincent said quietly, his gaze dropping slowly to the curves hidden beneath her trench coat. "He said no one would want you." Chloe swallowed hard, shame burning through her fear. She looked away. "Please, just let me go upstairs. Don't hurt me." Vincent stepped closer, invading her space, his chest brushing hers. He reached up, his large, warm hand cupping her jaw, tilting her face back up to his. "Hurt you," he repeated, a dark, low chuckle vibrating in his chest. "You used a mafia boss to escape a rat, Chloe Thompson. You tasted like fear and champagne, and you ran from me. I don't want to hurt you." His thumb stroked across her lower lip, right where she'd kissed him 3 nights before. "I've spent 3 days tearing this city apart looking for the woman who dared to steal from me," he whispered, his voice dropping to a gravelly, possessive purr. "And now that I've found you, I'm going to show you exactly how much a man can want every single inch of you." Behind them, Derek moaned in pain. Vincent didn't even look back. "Mateo," Vincent ordered, eyes never leaving Chloe's terrified, mesmerized face. "Take the trash outside. And if he ever comes within 10 miles of my woman again, take his other hand." The transition from the dingy, rain-soaked lobby of her apartment building to the sprawling, multi-million-dollar penthouse on Lakeshore Drive felt like a fever dream. Chloe hadn't packed a bag. She hadn't even locked her front door. Vincent Moretti had simply wrapped his heavy cashmere overcoat around her trembling, rain-chilled shoulders and guided her into the back of a bulletproof Maybach. Now sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, lighting up a bedroom larger than her entire apartment. She sat on the edge of a massive silk-sheeted bed, staring blankly at a tray of fresh pastries and black coffee a silent maid had left on the nightstand.
"You haven't eaten." Chloe jumped. Vincent was leaning in the mahogany doorway.
He'd shed the suit jacket and tie from the night before, wearing only a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and covered in dark, intricate ink. The tattoos clashed violently with the billionaire aesthetic around him, a stark reminder of the blood and brutality that had built his empire. "I'm not hungry," Chloe lied softly, wrapping her arms around her stomach, a defensive habit Derek had drilled into her.
"Mr. Moretti, I can't stay here. I have a job. I have a life."
Vincent pushed off the doorframe and walked toward her. With every step, the sheer dominance radiating off him seemed to pull the oxygen from the room. He didn't stop until he stood between her parted knees. He reached down, catching her wrists, gently pulling her arms away from her stomach. "You're hiding again," Vincent murmured, dark eyes locking on hers. "I told you last night, Mia Bella, no one is ever going to make you shrink yourself again. Especially not in my house." "Derek. Derek is a dead man walking if he ever breathes your name again," Vincent cut her off, voice lethal and cold. He knelt in front of her, unfazed by the ruin of his expensive slacks against the hardwood floor. His large hands settled warmly on her plush, heavy thighs. "Listen to me, Chloe. Men like that, small, weak men, they try to break down women who carry real power. Your body is magnificent. It is lush and soft and perfect. You are a goddess meant to be worshipped, not a secret to be starved." Chloe's breath hitched. A tear slipped down her cheek, completely unbidden. For 3 years she'd been told her weight was a burden, a flaw she owed the world an apology for. Now the most dangerous, powerful man in Chicago was on his knees, looking at her thick thighs and round hips like they were the Holy Grail. Vincent leaned forward and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the swell of her stomach through the silk of her borrowed nightgown. The gesture was so tender, so completely at odds with the violent mafia kingpin he was, that a sob tore from Chloe's throat. "I bought you clothes," Vincent said, standing and pulling her to her feet with effortless strength. He led her to a massive walk-in closet. Chloe gasped. The space was filled with dozens of custom-tailored designer garments, rich emerald wrap dresses from Oscar de la Renta, flowing silk blouses, white-fit red-soled Christian Louboutin heels that wouldn't pinch her feet. He hadn't just bought her clothes. He'd brought in a team to make sure every piece was designed specifically to flatter her plus-size figure. On the center island sat a velvet box holding a blindingly brilliant Cartier diamond necklace. "Vincent, this is too much. I can't accept this. I'm just an accountant." "You are mine," Vincent corrected smoothly, sliding his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, breathing her in. "And the woman who stands beside the head of the Moretti family wears whatever she pleases. Get dressed. Tonight we're going to Alinea. I want the whole city to see you." But what Vincent didn't tell her, what he kept carefully hidden behind the lavish gifts and the intoxicating, obsessive affection, was the storm brewing in the underworld. Downstairs, in the heavily guarded basement office of the penthouse, Matteo stood over a metal table. "The Russo syndicate is making moves, boss," Matteo reported when Vincent finally came down. "They found out about the girl. They know you brought her here." Vincent poured a glass of scotch, his expression hardening into a mask of pure, sociopathic calm. "How?" "Her ex." Matteo grunted, tossing a manila folder onto the desk. "Derek Gallagher. Turns out the banker's got a gambling problem. He owes the Russos $500,000. When we broke his wrist and humiliated him in that lobby, he went straight to Tommy Russo. Sold them Chloe's identity. Told them she's your new weakness." The crystal glass in Vincent's hand shattered. Whiskey and blood dripped onto the Persian rug. Weakness, Vincent repeated, a terrifying, humorless smile spreading across his face.
Tommy Russo thinks my woman is a weakness.
He pulled a monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped his bleeding hand. Double the perimeter guard. And Matteo, tell the boys to load the hollow points tonight. The Russos are going to try something at the restaurant. I want them to. The private dining room at Alinea was a masterclass in modern luxury, but Chloe could barely focus on the elaborate 20-course tasting menu.
She was too aware of the man sitting across from her. Vincent looked devastating in a midnight blue tuxedo.
He hadn't stopped touching her all night, a hand on her knee under the table, fingers tracing the bare skin of her shoulder, his dark eyes constantly dropping to the deep cleavage of the custom red velvet gown he'd chosen for her. He made her feel powerful.
He made her feel sexy. You're quiet, Vincent noted, sipping his wine.
I'm just overwhelmed, Chloe admitted, fingers toying with the stem of her glass. 3 days ago I was terrified of my own shadow.
Now I'm wearing a dress that costs more than my car, having dinner with a man who owns half the city.
She looked up, her gaze steady.
Are you going to keep me locked up, Vincent? Am I just a pet? Vincent set his glass down.
The playful, seductive edge in his eyes vanished, replaced by a searing intensity.
You are not a pet, Chloe. You are the only thing in my life that breathes life into me. If you want to leave right now, I'll put you in a car, give you $10 million, and you'll never see me again. But if you stay as my equal. My Donna.
Before Chloe could process the weight of that promise, the heavy mahogany doors of the private dining room blew open.
Chaos erupted. 3 men in dark leather jackets burst in, raising automatic weapons.
But Vincent had been waiting. Faster than Chloe could blink, he flipped the heavy oak dining table upward, threw her to the floor, and shielded her entirely with his own massive frame.
Deafening gunfire tore through the room. Crystal glasses exploded.
Plaster rained from the ceiling. Chloe screamed, hands pressed over her ears, face buried in Vincent's chest. He didn't flinch, he held her tight, a human fortress of muscle and bespoke tailoring.
Stay down! Vincent roared over the noise.
From the hallway, Matteo and 4 Moretti men returned fire. The gunfight was brutal, precise, and over in under 30 seconds. The 3 Russo hitters hit the floor, dead before they knew what went wrong. The ringing silence that followed was terrifying. The smell of copper and sulfur hung in the air. Vincent stood, pulling Chloe up with him, running his hands over her body, eyes wild with panic until he was certain she didn't have a single scratch.
Are you hurt? Talk to me, Chloe.
I'm okay, she choked out, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Bring him in, Vincent barked over his shoulder.
Matteo dragged a bloody, whimpering figure into the ruined dining room. It was Derek, bruised, missing a shoe, sobbing hysterically.
Chloe, please, he shrieked, struggling against Matteo's grip.
They made me do it.
The Russos, they said they'd kill me if I didn't tell them where you were.
Chloe stared down at the pathetic, sniveling man on the floor.
This was the man who had terrorized her for years. The man who'd made her hate her own reflection. And right now, watching him grovel in the shattered glass of a Michelin star restaurant, she felt nothing but disgust. Vincent pulled a sleek silver handgun from his shoulder holster, cocked it, the click echoing loud in the room, and pressed the barrel to Derek's forehead. You sold what's mine, Vincent said softly, the total absence of emotion in his voice more terrifying than any shout.
Give me one reason I shouldn't paint this floor with your brains.
Vincent, wait, Chloe said.
Vincent froze.
He didn't lower the gun, but he looked at her. The men in the room tensed, stunned that anyone would dare interrupt the boss mid-execution. Chloe stepped around the overturned table, her red velvet dress sweeping through the glass. She looked down at Derek. He looked up at her with pathetic, hopeful eyes, certain she was about to save him. You told me I was weak, Chloe said, her voice steady and clear.
You told me I was nothing without you. But look at you, Derek. You're a coward.
You sold me out to save your own miserable life. She turned to Vincent. She looked at the gun in his hand, the blood on the floor, the dark, violent underworld he commanded, and understood, with total clarity, that she didn't fear his darkness, because his darkness existed entirely to protect her light. Chloe reached out and gently pushed his gun arm down.
Don't kill him in here. It'll ruin my dress. Vincent's breath caught.
A slow, wicked, impossibly proud smirk spread across his face. He looked at her like she'd just handed him the world.
Mateo, Vincent said, never taking his eyes off Chloe. Take Mr. Gallagher to the docks.
Make sure he understands the penalty for his debts.
No, Chloe, no, please.
Derek screamed as he was dragged backward out of the room, his voice fading down the hallway until a heavy door slammed shut behind him, cutting him off completely. The dining room fell quiet again. Vincent holstered his weapon and stepped toward her. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs wiping a stray smudge of dust from her cheek.
You didn't run, Vincent whispered, in awe. I'm done running, Chloe answered, reaching up to grip his wrists.
She stepped into his space, pressing her soft, full curves flush against his hard, muscled body.
You promised I wouldn't have to hide anymore. Vincent let out a low groan, wrapping his arms around her waist and lifting her off the floor. He kissed her, a bruising, desperate, fiercely possessive kiss that tasted of gunpowder and absolute devotion. Never again, Mia Bella, Vincent vowed against her lips, his hands sweeping over the lush weight of her hips. You are the Donna of Chicago now. Let them try to look down on you. I'll burn the whole damn city to the ground for you.
Chloe kissed him back, letting the heat of the mafia kingpin wash away the last remnants of her past. She had accidentally kissed a stranger in a hallway, desperate to escape her own life. In return, he had given her a kingdom.